All right, guys. So, just like we talked about earlier, or well, I don't know if I'm actually even going to put that video out or not, but I made another video, or I made a video that I'm not sure if I'm going to upload, that I was talking about a 389 versus a aerodynamic truck. Okay, and what that stems from is, you know, I've been seeing all this stuff on Facebook about how you know, the Peterbilt drivers are dumb and this and that, and a couple of guys in my comment section telling me how much of a moron I am. I don't know if it's because of the way I speak, that I come off sounding kind of ignorant, or if it's because I drive a 389, but you know what? Let's go ahead and get into the numbers, all right? 389 versus an aero truck. All right. And for this example, we're just going to go ahead and take the really popular aero truck, Cascadia. All right. So, in our example, we're going to have a, and I already did this once, and I wrote all the Freightliner stuff in red, and you couldn't see it, so. We're going to have Peterbilt in blue, Freightliner in green. Okay? Because you make so much money with a Freightliner, so it needs to be in green. So we're going to have our 389 in blue and our Freightliner in green. And we're going to have our all of our other stuff over here in black, all of our secondary stuff. So we're going to have a few assumptions, all right? Assumption number one is 12,000 miles a month. Assumption number two is $20,000. My Lord. $20,000 down for 66 months at 8.99%. Okay, now that's actually my financing on my truck, okay? So, my Peterbilt was, oh, and another thing. So we're going to have a few omissions over here because we're not going to look at actual total cost of ownership, right? Because there are a few things that are going to be a wash, okay? Those things include your 2290 base plate, New Mexico weight and distance tax, KYU tax, New York HUT tax, probably your insurance, ELD, blah, 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 oil changes, grease jobs. I mean, none of this stuff is going to be different. So we are going to ignore all that and just talk about the big time variables between a Peterbilt and a Freightliner, and that's purchase price and fuel mileage. That's the one everybody likes to talk about, and that's really the only thing that matters, because I mean, all this stuff, if there is a difference, it's, well, the only thing there would be a difference on is I don't know the oil change interval on a Detroit, on a Freightliner with a Detroit, and I was looking at a Freightliner with a Cummins, so it doesn't matter because it's the same. So we're going to omit the stuff that doesn't go away, no matter which truck you own, okay? So my Peterbilt was, let me sure I write this big enough where we can see it this time, 171,450, and I put $20,000 down, which gave me 151,450 that I financed under these conditions. 20,000 down, 66 months, 8.99%. The Freightliner that I looked at with a Cummins, because I want a Cummins, I don't want a Detroit. I don't like all that gear train on the back of the motor and the sensors and the blah, blah, blah and all that. You know, I know all that stuff's fuel efficiency and da-da-da, this and that, but I prefer the simplicity of a Cummins, okay? Freightliner I was looking at with a Cummins, 165 at $20,000 down. Would have gave us $45,000 financed under the same conditions. Okay. All right. So let's get our handy dandy Google car loan calculator out. And we're gonna calculate 151,450 at 66 months, 8.99%. And that's gonna give you my truck payment essentially. $66 months, $2,917 a month. My payment's really like $2,964. So I'm sure there's like some financing charges in there that I'm paying, but just bare bones interest, blah, blah, blah. That's what it is. So it gives us a truck note of 2,917. Now let's do the same thing over here for the Freightliner. This time we're going to go $145,000 because that's our number right here. So we've got a Freightliner note of $2,793. 2,793. All right, there's our note. That's what the bank wants every single month. Okay, now let's not forget our 12,000 mile a month, because that's what I run, right? I run about 12,000 miles a month. So, and this is an example in my case. So I had a buddy who had a Freightliner with a Cummins in it, X15 efficiency series. I have a performance series, you know, for the lack of whatever. Let's just assume they're not far off. Another thing to consider is that he was, if anything, I think I would get the worst fuel mileage with the performance series. But he was deadheading back every time, and he was doing LTL 4 or 5 stops. So he would load at the DC, first store unload some freight, second store unload some freight, third store unload some freight, and then go back, right? So he's getting less and less the more miles he goes, less weight, and then he's going back empty pretty much all the time, except for sometimes he'd take it back all back to the DC, but not very commonly. Another thing to consider on me is I don't deadhead very much. I do sometimes, but not a whole not 50-50. And I'm always in the mountains, and I'm always grossing nearly 80,000 pounds, at least 78,000, right? And I'm always out west, practically always. So where he's got the advantage in the fuel mileage of unloading some weight, I've got the disadvantage of staying heavy. Where I've got the advantage of doing some highway miles, he has the disadvantage of doing a lot of stop and go city stuff. All right, so, you know, I mean, the only way to have a real true comparison would be buy a Cascadia and have it just follow me around. But I'm just going off of information that I gathered. So he said he got 7 miles to the gallon. 7 miles per gallon. I know that I got 6.04 miles to the gallon. But we're just going to call it 6 for simplicity's sake. And a minute ago, I Googled the national average of fuel. Right now, it's 2.499. So we're just going to, for argument's sake, we're going to call it 2.5. Okay. So 6 miles a gallon on the Peterbilt divided by 2.5 on the fuel price divided by 6 miles a gallon on the Peterbilt gives us a fuel cost of 0.416 times 12,000 miles a month. We'll go ahead and work that out. Is right at $5,000 a month on the fuel. Per month. And we're ignoring DEF too, because, you know, if that is different, it's negligible, I'm sure. So now we take our 2.5 for our fuel price and 7 miles a gallon, divide them, and we come up with 35.357 for our fuel cost for our Freightliner. And we multiply that by 12,000 miles a month. gives us a fuel cost of $42.85 a month. Okay. So we can definitely see how the Freightliner is out cash flowing the Peterbilt big time. I mean, we're talking $200 a month in a truck note and then nearly $800 a month in fuel. That's nearly $1,000 a month. But let's see what happens whenever we dig a little deeper. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and add our fuel cost, $5,000 a month, plus our truck note, $2,917 a month, and we're going to, an assumption I forgot to tell you, is we're going to run the trucks for 500,000 miles, and we're going to swap them in. And at 12,000 miles a month, that's 41.6 months. We're going to call it 41 months. Traded in 2 weeks early. Okay, so we come up with a total of $79.17 a month on the Peterbilt. A month times 41 months, $324,597. Okay, now we're going to come over here and do the Freightliner. So we got a $42.85 a month fuel bill plus a $27.93 a month truck note equals $7,078. So $900 a month cheaper on the Freightliner. And then we're going to do that over the 41 months. And another assumption, but let me do this first. $290,198. Okay. Another assumption is that we cannot keep a truck for 20 years. Okay, that's another assumption. No 20-year-old trucks. Been there, done that, don't want to deal with it anymore. So we've got our peak cost over here under these assumptions, 6 miles a gallon for the Pete, 7 for the Freightliner, $171,450, which is what I paid for my 389, $165, which is what the Freightliner was that I looked at. Okay, we've got over a time span of 41 months. Fuel and truck note. We've got the 389 coming in at $324,597. We've got our Cascadia. Hey, and just to show that I'm not picking on Freightliners too much, I used to have Freightliners, and check out my cool Freightliner hat. Isn't that awesome? I thought it was cool. Couldn't walk away from it. So I had to spend my pilot points on it and get it. $290,198. Okay. Now, from personal experience, I know that I had a buddy who just recently sold his 3-year-old Peterbilt for $125,000. All right, so this right here is hard money out of our bank accounts. In each example, this is what we spend on a fuel and a truck note, and we assume that this stuff right here is largely going to be the same, right? Because the insurance, I mean, a $5,000 difference in value on a truck, I don't see how that's going to equate to a whole big substantial amount of savings. I think my comp and collision for the year is like $8,000 maybe. So, you know, a $5,000 reduction in value would probably be like $9 a month. I don't know. I'd have to call them and ask. So we're going to assume that it's a negligible difference. Okay, now back to the matter at hand. You can get on Truck Paper and look for yourself if you want. All right, I know that my friend just recently sold his 389 for $125,000, and it was 3 years old. And we're talking about 500,000 miles at 12,000 miles a month, 41 months, about 3.5 years old, right? 3 years and 5 months to be exact. So, and I was just recently looking on Truck Paper, and I found Cascadias on the low end for 40, on the high end for 60, and one as cheap as $14,000 before I put in the year filters. That was a 2014. And these were pretty nice Cascadias. And my Peterbilt, I mean, it's nice, but it's not the nicest one you can buy. So what we're going to assume is, since we're at 60 over here and 40 on the low end, we're going to assume a trade-off value or resale or whatever you want to call it of $50,000, right? And then the Peterbilt, and I know you guys are going to be like, oh, that's double, but this right here is where it makes the big difference. All right, I found them on the low end for $89,000, $90,000, and on the high end for $115,000. So, well, I mean, really in the middle is going to be about $103,000, but we're just going to call it $100,000. All right, and that's probably private party, not trade-in, okay? Just like this, you're not going to get no 50, if they're advertised for 50 grand on truck paper, you're not going to go trade it in for 50 grand, right? That's what the dealer's selling it for. So we're assuming that's what you could sell it for to an individual. So this right here is going to be $224,597. This one that's going to be $240,198. So in this example, the Peterbilt is cheaper by roughly $16,000, but we'll actually go ahead and do the math and see what it actually is, like $15,500 or something. We'll do the math and figure out what it is. $15,601 by the Peterbilt is cheaper than the Freightliner, because see, we got 100,000. We sold our Pete for 100. We only sold our Freightliner for 50. So the point of the matter is that $2.50 fuel, this good fuel mileage don't mean a whole lot. Now you change that number to $5 a gallon, you come up with a whole lot different picture, right? And I'll be the first to admit. So the Pete wins by $15,601 over the course of 41 months for a total of $380.51 a month. Okay, so that's the deal. And the reason I wanted to talk about this was, you know, I follow quite a few pages on Facebook, trucking pages and whatnot, and you would not believe the misconceptions out there that everybody thinks that everybody who has a hood truck is a moron, doesn't know how to count, doesn't know how to add, gets 3 miles to the gallon, you know, all this nonsense. So you might be asking yourself, well, you've just illustrated to us that a 389 is cheaper. And I have. So why in the world would a mega fleet want a Cascadia? A couple of reasons. High turnover, cheaper trucks, cheaper to park. Reason number 2, and the biggest one, a lot of that $50,000 bath they're taking over the Pete, I guarantee you they're buying their Cascadias, 50 of them, 100 of them at a time, and they're wiping a lot of that out. Secondly, they're buying their fuel cheaper than I am. All right, so, you know, my fleet is one truck. Their fleet is, you know, who knows, 3,500 trucks. So they're dealing with a little different set of circumstances than I am, obviously. But these pages that I follow, I'm not following, you know, I'm not listening to C.L. Werner's business advice on how to own an 8,000 truck fleet or whatever. I'm just reading owner-operator stuff and what they think and what they say. And you would not believe the number of people who say, oh, Freightliner gets better fuel mileage, and then the 389 guy comes in and says something real smart. If you're worried about fuel mileage, you're not charging enough. Dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Peterbilt's cheaper. Flat out, period. All right? It's just cheaper. You know, and this is a pretty doggone cheap Cascadia. I've seen them on there for $190,000. I've seen Pete's for $190,000 too. But I've seen those Western Stars for $175,000, $180,000. I found one the other day for $195,000. Nothing special about it. It wasn't a 4-axle heavy haul. It wasn't anything. It was just a Western Star with kind of a nice paint job. And that's it. You know, nothing crazy special about it. But as you can see, just because of resale value, even with 1 mile to the gallon less and $6,450 more on the purchase price, the Peterbilt's still $380.51 a month cheaper. And the reason we took the entire truck note and put it in on both of them is that's kind of the best way I can think of to factor in depreciation and interest and everything. Because this is going to be the number you've put in keeping the truck running, and that's the number you get back for selling the truck in both cases, right? So instead of going here and figure, well, 8.99%, well, appreciated over 66 months, and paid for 40, we'll just take the number of months we own the deadgun thing and the amount we sell it for, right? Now, I'm not saying that a Freightliner doesn't have serious advantages over a Peterbilt. You know, if somebody's running in the flat land hauling light loads and they can make this 7 into a 10, I very seriously doubt I'm ever going to get 10 miles a gallon in my truck regardless of how light the doggone load is, you know. So that would be one. Or if a guy's really concerned about short wheelbase, getting in and out, tight deliveries, whatever. That would be another one where the Freightliner would shine. Freightliner's probably going to shine under a light workload like we talked about, because the aerodynamics are really going to come into play then, because you're not heavy. I'm just talking about, in my specific instance, these are I talked to a guy with a Freightliner with a Cummins, which is what I was looking at, and he told me he got 7 miles a gallon. I talked to a couple of guys who do exactly what I do with Freightliners with Detroit, so they told me they were getting 6.5, 7. And this is actually what I get. I get 6 miles a gallon, 6.04. I got 6.04 one time, 6.2 one time on my IFTA. You know, I mean, it's about 6. So, you know, if we change this number to an 8, the Freightliner will probably win by a little bit. But I don't think 8 miles a gallon is really realistic what I do, you know? So, that's the deal. The Peterbilt, under this set of circumstances, is $15,601 cheaper. And I cut $25,000 off the resale value because I know a guy who just sold his 3-year-old Pete for $125. And, you know, it didn't have an air ride front end. Mine does. It didn't have the X15. It had an ISX. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm just... The moral of the story is there's a whole lot more to owning a truck than how much your payment is and how much the fuel costs. All right? Because which one do you want? You know, say you buy a truck and God forbid something catastrophic happens. You know, death in the family, you come down with a serious illness, whatever. Do you want this truck here that the resale value falls like a rock and you buy it, put 20 grand down on it, and you drive it off the lot, run it for 3 months, and now you're $18,000 in the hole? And you probably ain't even recovered from putting your $20,000 down on it. Because if any of y'all are like me, it was a pain in the rear to save up this 20 grand. I wiped myself out buying this truck. You know, I didn't want to take that risk that I buy that truck and then, you know, something crazy happened 4 months later, like the situation we're in right now would be a good example. And you're trying to unload this doggone truck and you're flipping $20,000 in the hole on the deadgum thing, just right from the start. You know, because I mean, by the time you're done with the truck, there's $50,000 difference between the two of them. Now, I don't know why in the world you would think the truck that cash flowed more money would hold a better market value, but it doesn't. And I don't know why, but it doesn't. I mean, maybe it's got something to do with build quality. My personal experience, Peterbilt builds a higher quality truck than Freightliner. You know, as far as cab assembly and all that sort of stuff. A friend of mine had a Cascadia, my old roommate, and he had 3 different ones, and every single one of them 8 steer tires. Michelin's, good steer tires. Just ate them. All 3 of them. You know, he had an International with the International motor in it. 20,000 miles, catastrophic engine failure, threw a rod side of the block. Now, if I've just coughed up $20,000 down and I'm kind of broke and I've got this big, you know, $2,600, $2,700 truck note and the doggone thing's going to throw a rod out. Now, I'm not saying all of them will, but, you know, if it were to, and it doesn't matter if it's under warranty, I can't sit around for a couple of months waiting to get into a dealership. So, truck quality is really important in my operation. You know? So, all of this to say that all these guys talking about their doggone, you know, how they get, you know, their big fuel squeezing trucks and and how everybody who has a hood's a dummy and so forth and so on, you know, it just ain't so. That's just the simple fact of the matter, you know. And if you're getting 10 miles a gallon in your Freightliner, good on you. You know, good on you. I just very seriously doubt that if I were to load 80,000 pounds and climb all those mountains into California and unload and bounce 40 miles up the street and reload and climb all those mountains across California and Nevada and into Utah and unload and bounce 20 miles and reload and climb all those mountains out of Utah and down into New Mexico and then go to Texas and unload, you know, I'm not going to get 10 miles a gallon, you know. I'm going to be going so slow in my Freightliner up the hill, 35 miles an hour, that aerodynamics aren't going to matter because I'm going to be going so slow, you know. But, you know, I don't really, you know, and honestly, I'll be honest with you guys, even in my case, if these numbers were reversed and the Freightliner were $380 a month cheaper, I'd probably still own the Pete, just from a preference standpoint. But, you know, as we can see, this right here is what my friend really got. This right here is what I really get. That was the actual price I looked at one. This is the actual price I paid for one. That's not quite my truck note. My truck note's $29.6448. But, you know, I probably had a $100 loan fee or, you know, what the heck ever. And they lumped that in there and the finance man goes to take his wife out for a steak dinner or whatever. So, you know, that's just the deal, you know, and we can see how the Freightliner is nearly $800 a month cheaper in fuel. It's $715 a month cheaper in fuel than the Peterbilt. And the truck note's $100 and some odd a month cheaper, you know. Oh, and another thing is this guy had optimized idle on his truck, right? So it wasn't, you know, the truck would turn on and like the air conditioner would run for a minute and then it would turn off or however that works. I don't have any of that nonsense on my truck. So this really isn't probably even an apples to apples comparison because he had some fuel saving gadgets on his that I don't have. So, and he, you know, even under that circumstance, whenever I discredited the Peterbilt more than what I know from personal experience it could bring, and another thing, the market's kind of crap right now too, so that's smart to consider that. And the, you know, the fact of the matter is, guys, just Freightliners or any aerodynamic truck is not going to hold their value like a hood truck will. Don't ask me why. I don't know. It's just the way it is. I didn't make the rules. That's just, I don't know. It's just how it is, you know. So this right here is why I prefer a Peterbilt, because in the long run, the Peterbilt's cheaper. Now, I'm not talking about buying a 20-year-old truck, you know, a 20-year-old Pete for double the money that you ought to be paying for a 20-year-old truck versus a 20-year-old Freightliner for about the money you ought to be paying for a 20-year-old truck. And then they're breaking down all the doggone time and your Freightliner parts are cheaper. All right, that's not what we're talking about, because I'm not going to buy another 20-year-old truck. Unless it's like a Play Pretty. But I ain't going to buy one to try to make a living with anymore because, you know, I've been over that a few videos back and, you know, this truck right here is substantially cheaper than my old Freightliner was. And, you know, so that's not the same thing. We're talking about a brand new 389, which I own, and a brand new Cascadia, which I entertained buying over the 389. But I ran through the numbers, and I determined that, and the fuel was a little higher back then, but I determined that the Peterbilt was ultimately going to be cheaper, and the Peterbilt was going to be a safer bet in the event that something bad happened because I'd maintain positive equity in it at a shorter time frame than in the Freightliner. With Freightliner, you never get positive equity in it if you only put $20,000 down. So, you know, I'm pretty sure you'd be upside down on that truck from day one all the way to the end. So whenever you trade the doggone thing in, they're not going to give you as much for it as you owe on it. You're going to have to cough up some money and then buy your next $165,000, $170,000 Freightliner. And, you know, you just keep on increasing. Peterbilt maintains equity. So, you know, and what I'm talking about equity is I'm talking about money that the truck is worth that you don't owe on it. You know, I'm not talking about the truck's actually appreciating in value because we all know that doesn't happen. So, you know, that's just how I ended up, you know, at my decision to buy a 389. I played the Freightliner game. I played the cheap truck game. I played all the games. And, you know, from 10 months owning this thing, I promise you, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than my old truck was. And as we can see from the numbers, it's cheaper than the Freightliner is. And that's just that. You know, there's a lot, like I said, there's just so much more to consider than purchase price, truck note, and fuel mileage. But, you know, I'm not dogging on you, man. If you want to buy a Freightliner and you think that's the safe bet because it's a smaller note and better fuel mileage and you cash flow every month and you think the money in your bank account than in a truck's better, then, you know, whatever, man. Fine. That's fine. But, you know, I'm just saying that there's a little bit more to consider than the truck note and the fuel mileage. You know, there's a whole doggone truck sitting there that could break, cost you money, you know, whatever. There's a whole lot, you know, there's a whole lot more to consider than just the note and the fuel mileage is my only point. So that means that just because a truck gets 8 miles to the gallon, another truck gets 5 miles a gallon, that, you know, one truck is, that the 8 mile a gallon truck's automatically cheaper, right? It's not the case. Or automatically more profitable, I should say. It's not the case, right? Because we don't know what kind of freight the 5 mile a gallon guy's hauling. We don't know where he's buying his fuel. I mean, there's just a whole lot of things to consider. So, you know, with that being said, you know, that just about wraps it up, I guess. I've seen some guys ranting and raving on YouTube talking about how guys who buy Peterbilts are dummies and how they're so smart. And, you know, one guy paid like $180,000 for his Aerodynamic truck. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, that ain't good. That thing's going to be worth $40,000 in 5 years, man. You're still probably going to owe, you know, 105 on it. You know, oh man, that's bad news. And that gun thing ain't going to save no 60 grand over the course of 5 years. So, you know, man, it saved close to it, but not enough. And that's just to, you know, catch up on your inequity. Never mind the actual value that the Peterbilt's gained, because that's not something you can't just look at one number to one number. You got to look at the spread, right? That's where the big difference comes in. So, over the course of 41 months, the Peterbilt cost $224,597 to own at 6 miles a gallon in this, you know, these financing conditions and so forth. And that excludes all this stuff. And the Freightliner cost $240,198 to own. And the only difference, or the big game switch match or what have you, was that the Freightliner falls off in resale value so much. So, you know, hey, if you're getting 9 miles a gallon in your Freightliner, fine. But I guarantee you, me and you probably aren't hauling the same kind of freight. And if we are hauling the same kind of freight, you're probably deadheading one way. And I don't deadhead one way. I load both ways. So, that's just, you know, my, to repeat and beat a dead horse some more, this is just my example of why I don't think that people who buy 389s are completely ridiculous and stupid and care. I mean, to hear these guys talk, you would think we're trying to get fat guys at the fuel aisle and we're trying to get their phone numbers from them. Like, yeah, man, look at my Peterbilt. I'm so flipping cool, blah, 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 blah. Man, that ain't, don't get me wrong. I love driving my Peterbilt. It's freaking awesome. But I could care less what anybody thinks about it, you know. I bought it for me, not for everybody else. And, you know, we can see in the numbers that, you know, it's probably the wiser choice compared to these two trucks. Now, you go buy you a Freightliner for $100 grand. Well, shoot, you just wiped out that $50,000 loss in resale value and came out another $15,000 ahead. So, in that case, the Freightliner is going to be $15,000 cheaper. Notice something? In that case, the Freightliner is going to be $380 a month cheaper. But I'm Michael. I buy one truck at a time. I ain't going to go to a dealership and be like, yeah, give me one for $100,000 or I'm walking out. They're going to be like, you saw the door when you came in, right? You know? So, and another thing that I considered was the volume of Freightliners on the road. You know, there's just so many of them. And I've had luck dealing with Peterbilt. Their customer service, in my opinion, is pretty darn good. They stand behind their product. And I've heard some horror stories about Freightliner. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've just heard stories. So, and I know that it's probably unrealistic to expect the same level of service out of Freightliner when every doggone truck on the road's a Freightliner. Their dealership's probably packed out the freaking gate, you know, with trucks waiting to get in. So, you know, I wanted a truck dealer that had a lower volume of trucks on the road. And I think a lot of this is because people look at it at more of an operational cost and less as a cost of ownership. All right. Another thing I'd like to go over is cost per mile versus cost per day. And I'll save that for another day, but I have my own opinions on that. But anyways, you guys can kind of see how I think that a 389 is a little bit better of a deal than a Cascadia or a 579 or, you know, whatever aerodynamic truck that the value falls like a fat kid on a broken diving board, you know. It just to the ground. So anyways, that's the deal with that. And we will try to get this stuff uploaded to y'all today. And yeah, that's about it, guys. Hope this kind of cleared some things up. And you know, obviously right now the market conditions are a little different. You know, I've seen screenshots of freight going across the country for 70 cents a mile. I don't think there's a profitable truck that can haul that load. That's rough. You know, that's freaking rough. So anyways, this is just, you know, I think that I don't think, I mean, obviously the numbers indicate that the Peterbilt's a little bit better of a buy than the Cascadia. So that's the dealio. And a brand new truck to brand new truck. It's not brand new Pete to 5-year-old Cascadia, which in that case, you know, you'd have to include maintenance cost in there. And I really think the Pete would really shine in that instance. But anyways, guys, that's the deal. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope there was some valuable information in it. I hope that I didn't lose too much information in all my rambling. But that's what's going on. So we will catch you guys later on.